There is a world that exists just on the other side of a long, deep breath. A world of gray stone castles, where cold winds push through empty hallways at night, where firelight flickers across the faces of kings and queens and ordinary people caught up in storms larger than themselves, where the summer grass eventually fades and the first snowflakes drift down from a sky the color of old iron, and someone, somewhere, whispers a warning that nobody quite believes. That world is Westeros, and tonight, if you want it, you can sink into it slowly. You can let it carry you somewhere quiet, somewhere where the story is already unfolding, and you don't have to do anything at all except listen. So, get comfortable now. Adjust your pillow. Feel the weight of the blanket settle around you. There is nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to solve. The only thing happening tonight is the story, and the story has been waiting patiently for you. This is the entire tale of Game of Thrones, told from the very beginning to the very end. Every house, every betrayal, every heartbreak, every moment of unexpected grace. All of it, slow and steady, like embers cooling in a fireplace after everyone else has gone to sleep. Let's begin. Part 1. The world before the storm. Long before the events that tore Westeros apart, the continent had a shape to it, a character, a way of being that made it feel, if not exactly safe, then at least familiar and sturdy. There were rules here, even if those rules were cruel. There was order, even if that order was unjust. And the people who lived under that order had, for the most part, learned to accept its terms. Westeros is a continent roughly the size of South America. It stretches from the frozen north, where the world ends in a wall of ancient ice nearly 700 feet tall, all the way down to the warm southern shores, where the waters run blue and the days last longer. Between those two extremes lie 7 distinct kingdoms, or what were once 7 distinct kingdoms, before a man named Aegon Targaryen arrived with 3 dragons roughly 3 centuries before our story begins and burned most of his opposition into submission. After that conquest, the 7 kingdoms became the 7 kingdoms, unified under one crown and one throne, a throne made, so the legends say, from the melted and fused swords of all the lords who had surrendered to him, shaped by dragonfire into something jagged and uncomfortable, and impossible to sit in for very long without developing an ache in places you'd rather not discuss. The seat of power is a city called King's Landing, built on the eastern coast where the Blackwater Rush meets the sea. It is enormous and crowded and smells, in the summer, of approximately what you would expect a city of 1 million people without modern sanitation to smell like. The Red Keep sits on a bluff above it, ancient and imposing, its towers visible from the harbor, its dungeons going down into the rock below the city. The Great Sept of Baelor, the cathedral of the realm's dominant religion, dominates another hill. Between and around these elevated structures, the city sprawls. The Street of Steel where the blacksmiths work, the Street of Sisters, the harbor districts where the docks and warehouses and brothels cluster together, the flea-bottom slums where the poorest residents live in conditions that would not look out of place in any real medieval city's worst quarters. It is, in short, a real place, grimy and vital and full of people trying to get by. The Iron Throne, the seat of power in all of Westeros. The thing that everyone in this story, at one point or another, will want, or fear, or both. By the time our story opens, the Targaryens no longer sit on it. The last Targaryen king was Aerys II, known by his epithet, the Mad King. His madness did not arrive all at once. It crept in slowly over years, a paranoia that deepened into genuine instability, a cruelty that had always been there, but grew less restrained as time went on. He had the habit of burning people alive. He found it beautiful, apparently. He kept vast stores of a substance called wildfire, a chemical compound produced by the alchemists of King's Landing, a liquid that burns so hot and so long that water cannot extinguish it, hidden beneath the city of King's Landing, waiting for the moment he would need it. That moment nearly came. During the rebellion that ousted him, surrounded by enemies, he apparently gave the order to burn the city. Burn it all. Kill every last one of them. Let the ashes be his answer. He was stopped by the very man sworn to protect him. Ser Jaime Lannister, Knight of the King's Guard, the elite bodyguard of the crown, walked into the throne room and drove a sword through the back of the man he was oath-bound to defend. He then sat down on the Iron Throne and waited, and that is how Robert Baratheon's forces found him when they arrived to claim victory. Sitting on the throne, his armor streaked red, looking at nothing in particular. They called him Kingslayer after that, a name that would follow him for the rest of his life like a shadow. Robert Baratheon won the rebellion. He was a huge man, Robert, with a laugh that filled rooms and a personality built like a battering ram. In his youth, he had been a fearsome warrior, the kind of man who could crush a breastplate with a warhammer and make it look effortless. He loved fighting and feasting and women with approximately equal enthusiasm. He was not subtle. He was not particularly wise. But he was beloved, in the way that enormously vital, enormously loud people sometimes are. And when he took the throne, the realm breathed something close to relief. He married Cersei Lannister, daughter of Tywin Lannister, the most powerful lord in the realm, and arguably the most dangerous man in Westeros. The Lannisters were everything the Baratheons were not. They were elegant and calculating, steeped in gold from the mines of Casterly Rock, comfortable with deception in a way that most honest people find slightly unsettling. Tywin especially. Tywin Lannister had the bearing of a man who had decided, sometime in his youth, that sentiment was a weakness he could not afford, and had spent the decades since systematically cutting it out of himself. He loved his house. He loved legacy and reputation and the Lannister name. Everything else was, to him, a complication. Cersei was her father's daughter in almost every way that mattered. She was brilliant. She was strategic. She was patient in the manner of someone who is waiting for the right moment and knows that the right moment will eventually arrive. She had grown up understanding that as a woman in Westeros, her power would always have to be borrowed, always have to be exercised through someone else, through her father, through her husband, through her son. She had internalized this not with resignation, but with a kind of cold fury that she kept mostly hidden, mostly quiet, mostly compressed into something that looked from the outside like dignity. Robert and Cersei's marriage was not happy. Robert had been in love with a woman named Lyanna Stark, and Lyanna had died, under circumstances that are complicated and that we will come back to before the two could be together. He had married Cersei for political necessity, and Cersei, for her part, had long since redirected whatever love she was capable of toward the one person who had been present with her in a way no one else had been, her twin brother, Jaime. The relationship between Cersei and Jaime Lannister is one of the darker strands running through this entire story, and it is impossible to tell the story honestly without acknowledging it. They loved each other in the way that twins sometimes do, with a closeness that came from sharing a womb, from growing up as reflections of each other, from never quite trusting the world outside themselves with the fullness of who they were. That love had, somewhere along the way, become something else as well, something that Westeros would have considered a sin and a crime. The children Cersei presented to the realm as Robert's, Joffrey, Myrcella, Tommen, were not Robert's children. They were Jaime's. This secret, and what happens when it begins to unravel, is where our story actually starts. But before we get to the events that ignite everything, we should settle ourselves in the North, because the North is where the story really begins, emotionally. Winterfell is where the heart of this tale lives, even when that heart is being broken. The North is cold, not just climatically cold, though it is certainly that, with winters that can last years and storms that bury entire villages. It is cold in the way that old stone is cold, in the way that places untouched by pretense or performance tend to feel. The people of the North are direct. They do not play the elaborate social games of the South, with its court intrigue and careful marriages and elaborate ceremonies of allegiance. Northerners are blunt. They say what they mean. They keep their oaths. They remember their grudges. They are, by the standards of the more populated and powerful South, considered somewhat unsophisticated. By their own standards, they are simply honest. The Lord of the North is Eddard Stark, called Ned by most of the people who know him. He is not a young man, not really, though he carries himself with a kind of tired straightness that might pass for youth in dim light. He has dark hair going gray at the temples and eyes that look like they have seen enough to stop being surprised by most things. He is the kind of person who other people call honorable, and they mean it as a compliment, even when they also mean it, quietly, as a limitation. Honor, in Westeros, can get you killed. Ned Stark knows this. He has lived long enough to know this. He chooses it anyway. He has a wife, Catelyn, whose maiden name was Tully, from the Riverlands to the south. She came to him as a stranger. She had initially been promised to his brother, who died before the wedding, and Ned inherited the arrangement. And she fell in love with him gradually, in the way that happens between people who are fundamentally compatible but have not yet discovered it. She is warm where he is guarded, socially adept where he tends towards silence, fiercely protective in a way that sometimes leads her to make decisions with her heart when her head might have served her better. Together they have 5 children, and each of those children is going to matter enormously to this story. Robb is the eldest. He is everything a Northern Lord's firstborn should be: broad-shouldered, capable, well-liked by the men who follow him, possessed of the stark combination of stubbornness and genuine warmth. He has his mother's coloring, reddish-brown hair, and a face that flushes easily, and he carries himself with the careful confidence of someone who knows he will one day inherit a great deal of responsibility and is trying to be ready for it. Sansa is next. She is 11 years old as the story begins, and she is, in the gentlest possible sense, a dreamer. She has been raised on stories of knights and ladies, of chivalry and courtly love, of a world where beauty and goodness are rewarded, and where handsome princes choose their brides from among the worthy. She believes in all of this, not because she is foolish, but because she is young and has not yet been given reason to doubt it. She will be given reasons, many of them. The story is not kind to Sansa's illusions, but what the story does with what it leaves behind is one of the more quietly extraordinary things in all of Game of Thrones. Arya is the 3rd child. She is 9, dark-haired, where Sansa is fair, small, and quick, and absolutely uninterested in the path that everyone around her assumes she will take. She does not want to sew. She does not want to sit still and smile at lords. She wants to move. She wants to fight. She has a kind of concentrated, coiled energy to her that her dancing teacher Syrio Forel will one day recognize and channel into something extraordinary. She has a list. She doesn't have it yet, not at the start, but she will. She will carry it quietly in the back of her mind like a very small, very dangerous flame. Bran is the 4th child. He is 7, a boy with enormous brown eyes and the habit of climbing everything: walls, towers, the old trees in the Godswood. He climbs because he loves it, because the view from above changes everything, because from high enough you can see the whole world laid out small and comprehensible below you. This joy of altitude, this desire to see everything from the highest possible vantage, is going to define Bran more than he could possibly imagine. For now, though, he is just a boy who climbs. And then there is Rickon. He is 3 years old and mostly appears in the story as a small, confused presence and at the edges of events that are too large for him to understand. He is, in the calculus of this narrative, the youngest Stark, and the youngest Starks do not tend to fare well. There is also Jon Snow. He lives at Winterfell with the Stark children, but he is not Catelyn's son. He is Ned's acknowledged bastard, born of an unnamed woman during the war, raised under the Stark roof in circumstances that Catelyn has never fully forgiven. Jon knows he is a bastard. He has been reminded of it, implicitly and explicitly, his entire life. He wears the gray eyes and dark hair of the Stark side, and he carries himself with a quiet dignity that speaks both to Ned's influence and to the particular strength that develops in people who grow up feeling they don't quite belong anywhere. Jon Snow is arguably the most important person in this entire story, but he doesn't know that yet. He just knows that he is going to join the Night's Watch, the ancient order of men who guard the wall in the far north, and that going there feels like the only real option available to him. You can't inherit. You can't marry well. You can't rise in the South without a name that opens doors. At the Wall, none of that matters. The Wall itself deserves a moment of attention, because it is one of the most extraordinary things in the world of this story. It is, as mentioned, nearly 700 feet tall. It runs for roughly 300 miles from coast to coast, sealing off the northern end of Westeros from the lands beyond. It was built, according to legend, approximately 8,000 years before our story begins, in the aftermath of an event called the Long Night, a winter that lasted a generation, in which terrible creatures came from the far north and nearly destroyed humanity. The Night's Watch was founded to man the wall forever, to keep watch for whatever might come again from the lands beyond. By the time our story begins, the Night's Watch has dwindled from its ancient glory into something much sadder. It numbers only about 1,000 men, drawn mostly from criminals and outcasts and men with nowhere else to go. The castles along the wall are mostly empty, maintained by skeleton crews. The wildlings, the free folk, as they call themselves, who live beyond the wall, are the real concern of the Watch in the present day. The supernatural threats of ancient legend are considered, by most educated people in Westeros, to be exactly that, legend. They are wrong. But we will come to that in time. For now, let the world settle around you. Let Winterfell exist in your imagination as a real place. Gray stone against gray sky, the smell of pine and cold air, the sound of sword practice in the yard below. A family intact, a world that still makes a kind of sense. The storm is coming, but it hasn't arrived yet. And when you're ready, we'll follow it in. If you're watching this late at night or early in the morning or somewhere in between, drop a comment and let us know where you are in the world and what time it is. There's something really lovely about knowing people are settling in from all different corners of the earth for the same story. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is a perfect time. There's a lot more like this coming, and you don't want to miss it. Part 2. Winter is Coming. The Fall of Ned Stark. It begins, as so many catastrophes do, with an invitation. King Robert Baratheon rides north from King's Landing, with his entire court trailing behind him, queen and children and counselors and knights and servants, and all the noise and color that royalty drags along wherever it goes. He comes to Winterfell to ask Ned Stark to serve as his Hand of the King, his chief advisor and administrator, the man who runs the realm when the king is too busy hunting or drinking, or both. The previous Hand, Jon Arryn, has died. The circumstances of his death are suspicious, though Robert does not seem particularly suspicious about them. He needs someone he trusts. He has known Ned Stark since they were both fostered together as boys at the Eyrie under Jon Arryn himself. And in Robert's estimation, Ned is the most trustworthy man in Westeros, which is almost certainly true, which is also, as we will see, part of the problem. Ned doesn't want to go. He loves Winterfell. He loves the cold and the quiet, and the life he has built here. He knows, in the way that experienced men sometimes know things they can't quite articulate, that King's Landing is not a place that treats honest men kindly. But Robert asks him, and Robert is his king and his oldest friend, and Ned Stark keeps his oaths. So south they go. Two things happen before the royal party leaves Winterfell, and both of them are important. The first is that young Bran, doing what Bran does, climbs the walls of Winterfell out of habit, lets his feet find familiar handholds in the old stone, pulls himself up and up until he reaches a tower window he wasn't supposed to reach. And through that window, he sees something he was never meant to see. He sees Queen Cersei and Ser Jaime in a moment of unmistakable intimacy. The window, the shock on their faces when they realize they are not alone, the single terrible moment of decision before Jaime reaches out, takes Bran's small wrists gently, looks him in the eye, and says something quiet, and pushes him. Bran falls. He survives, though the fall breaks his spine and leaves him unable to walk. He is unconscious for days. When he wakes, he remembers nothing of what he saw, which is some comfort. But the fall itself, and what it will require of him over the years that follow, are going to reshape him entirely. Bran Stark the Climber, the boy who loved height, will become something else, something quieter and stranger and ultimately more powerful than anyone around him can yet comprehend. The second thing that happens is that Ned's bastard son, Jon Snow, announces his intention to go north and join the Night's Watch. Catelyn does not miss him. Ned feels the loss deeply, quietly, in the way he feels most things. He and Jon say goodbye without quite saying it, the way men in this world often do, leaving things unspoken that really should be spoken. It will be a long time before anyone knows how much was left unsaid. In King's Landing, Ned arrives in a city that is everything Winterfell is not. It is hot and crowded and full of people moving quickly and looking at each other sideways. The Red Keep rises on a hill above it all, massive and ancient, its towers and halls home to hundreds of courtiers and servants and soldiers, all arranged in the elaborate hierarchy of the royal court. Ned moves through it like a man who has been handed someone else's life and is trying to be polite about it. He has two allies in this place, or people who present themselves as allies, and neither of them will be quite what they appear. Lord Peter Baelish, called Littlefinger, is master of coin, the realm's treasurer. He is a small man with clever eyes and a habit of smiling a little more than the situation warrants. He grew up alongside Catelyn in the Riverlands and has been in love with her in some form or another ever since. He channels that love into helpfulness, directing Ned toward the information he needs about Jon Arryn's death. He seems trustworthy, especially in this place of strangers. He is not. Lord Varys, called the Spider, is master of whispers, the realm's spy master. He is a stout, hairless man who affects a gentle, slightly theatrical personality and keeps his real opinions carefully concealed behind the performance. He has informants everywhere. He knows things before most people know they have happened. He approaches Ned with what seem like genuine warnings. He tells Ned to be careful. He tells Ned that the capital is more dangerous than he knows. He is, in this instance, entirely sincere. It will not be enough. What Ned uncovers, slowly and methodically, and with the stubborn persistence of a man who cannot leave a thing alone once he's started pulling on it, is devastating. Jon Arryn died because he had discovered the truth. The truth that Cersei's children are not Robert's, that the line of succession, the very foundation of the legitimate order of the realm, is built on a lie. Ned finds the evidence carefully, piece by piece, the different coloring of Joffrey compared to every Baratheon in the family's history, the old accounts of bastard children from Baratheon blood that always showed the same dark features, some old letters, some careful mathematics. He builds the case until it is inescapable. He confronts Cersei with it. He gives her warning, time to take her children and flee, time to spare herself and them from whatever would come if Robert learned the truth. It is a gesture of mercy that almost no one else in his position would have made. It is also, from a purely strategic standpoint, an enormous mistake. Cersei knows what Ned knows now. She can act first. Robert is killed on a hunting trip. It is arranged carefully, wine enough to dull his responses, a boar that would normally have been driven away allowed to gore him fatally. Robert Baratheon, who could have survived almost any battlefield, dies from a wound he gets drunk in a forest. He dies knowing he was a poor king. He dies asking Ned to serve as regent until Joffrey is of age. And Ned, sitting at his friend's bedside, watches him go with the expression of a man who already knows what is coming and cannot stop it. Joffrey Baratheon is 13 years old, and he is, to be completely honest about it, one of the most frightening children in the history of fictional television. It is not just that he is cruel. It is that his cruelty is animated by a kind of absolute certainty that no one can touch him, that he can do whatever he wants and the world will rearrange itself to accommodate his whims. This certainty was given to him by his mother, whose love, genuine and complete, was also completely untempered by any demand that he behave with anything resembling decency. Joffrey has been told his entire life that he is special and powerful and untouchable, and he has taken that lesson and turned it into something that looks, in practice, like pure malice. When Ned tries to expose the truth, when he shows Joffrey's regent, the small council, the paperwork proving that Robert's will named him regent and not Cersei, the Lannister guards move. Ned's own men are cut down around him. He is arrested. He is held in the dungeons of the Red Keep while the court above him sorts out what to do with him. There is a moment, a real moment, where it seems like it might be okay, where the story might let Ned Stark live. His daughters are still in the capital. Sansa is betrothed to Joffrey and intercedes on her father's behalf. Cersei seems to want a quiet resolution. Ned confesses to treason, is sent to the wall, everyone moves on. Even Ned, against every instinct he has, agrees to do this. He agrees to confess to a lie, to stand up before the people of King's Landing and declare himself a traitor in exchange for his life and his daughter's safety. He makes his confession. He stands on the steps of the Great Sept of Baelor, the enormous cathedral that dominates the city's skyline. He speaks the words he was told to speak. And Joffrey, because he is Joffrey, because the script that everyone agreed on meant nothing to him, gives the order to execute him anyway. The sword that carries Ned Stark's head from his shoulders is his own. Ice, the great sword of House Stark, an ancestral weapon passed down through generations, forged from Valyrian steel and kept in the Great Hall of Winterfell for as long as anyone can remember. It falls and it is done. Arya is in the crowd below. She sees it happen. Sirio Farrell, her dancing teacher, has been killed, or at least has disappeared under circumstances that strongly suggest he was killed, trying to help her escape, and she is alone in the city now, disguised as a boy named Ari, passing herself off as a nobody. She sees her father die from across the plaza, pushed forward by the crowd, too far away to hear his last words, too far away to do anything at all except watch and breathe and survive and remember. Sansa is there too, close enough to watch her father's death, to hear the crowd roar and then go quiet, to feel the world she thought she understood dissolve completely around her. The Ned Stark arc is not, despite everything, a story about failure. It is a story about what happens when a genuinely good person tries to operate by rules of decency in a world that has stopped respecting those rules. Ned was not naive. He was not stupid. He was a man who believed that if he moved cheerfully and honestly and with genuine concern for doing the right thing, the outcome would be something that a decent world would produce. Westeros was not, in that moment, a decent world. His death says something about the story we are watching. It says that this is not a story where being good is the same as being safe. It says that honor and survival are not always compatible. It says that the people who play by the rules, who honor their oaths, who say what they mean and mean what they say, are not automatically protected by those virtues. Sometimes they are destroyed by them, and it launches everything that follows, because the death of Ned Stark does not end the Stark story. It ignites it. Robb in the north calls his father's bannermen. The lords of the north answer him. They march south, and before the campaign is very old, his men are calling him something new. Not just the son of Eddard Stark, not just the Lord of Winterfell, the king in the north, the first king in the north in a very long time. The northern lords kneel to him, one after another, and the old war cry, war cry that they remembered from their ancestors, fills the hall. The king in the north. Winter is coming, and so is war. Part 3. The Dragon Across the Water. While Westeros is tearing itself apart in the south, across the narrow sea, in the free cities and the open grasslands of Essos, a young woman is learning what she is capable of. Daenerys Targaryen is 15 years old at the start of our story, and she has never in her life felt safe. She is the last daughter of the Mad King Aerys, part of the family that lost the Iron Throne in the rebellion, and she has grown up in exile, passed from city to city in Essos, with only her older brother Viserys for company. Viserys is not a reliable source of comfort or protection. He is handsome in the sharp, silver-haired Targaryen way, and he is obsessed with reclaiming what he considers his birthright with an intensity that has long since crossed the border, from ambition into something closer to madness. He sells Daenerys, not in a metaphorical sense. He arranges her marriage to Khal Drogo, the leader of one of the great Dothraki Khalasars, a nomadic horse-riding people from the eastern grasslands, immensely powerful militarily and operating by codes and customs entirely unlike anything Daenerys has encountered, in exchange for an army he thinks Drogo will give him to take back Westeros. Daenerys goes to this marriage as a possession, as an object of exchange. She stands at her wedding feast, this small, silver-haired girl, and she watches her new husband and his people, and she understands that she is utterly alone in a way she has never been before, surrounded by people whose language she doesn't speak yet, and whose way of life she can barely begin to understand. She is terrified. She is also paying very close attention. What happens next, over the months that follow, is one of the more careful and interesting things that the early seasons of Game of Thrones do with character. Daenerys doesn't just survive, she learns. She learns Dothraki, haltingly at first, and then with increasing fluency. She learns to ride, to sit a horse the Dothraki way. She learns to eat the food, to understand the customs. She learns Drogo himself, his silences and his intensity, and the particular way he holds himself, like a man who has never been uncertain about anything in his life. And Drogo, in turn, learns her. He is not, initially, particularly attentive to her as a person rather than as a wife. But something happens between them over time, a genuine warmth, a recognition that builds into something neither of them was expecting. She tells him what she wants, she expresses herself, and he listens. By the time the season is in its middle chapters, this is a real marriage, as real as anything in this story gets. Not perfect, built on an unequal foundation, complicated by the surrounding world, but present and warm and human. Viserys, meanwhile, is coming apart. He has always been unstable, but in Essos, without the structures of power and respect that he believed were his birthright, he unravels faster. He threatens Daenerys. He threatens Drogo. He makes demands that are outrageous by Dothraki standards, demanding his army, demanding deference, demanding that the world conform to his sense of what it owes him. In the end, he draws a weapon at a Dothraki feast, the worst possible violation of Dothraki custom, and Drogo responds in the Dothraki way. He gives Viserys his crown, a crown of molten gold poured over his head while Daenerys watches, dry-eyed, and understands that she is no longer her brother's property or her brother's bargaining chip. She is Khaleesi. And then she is devastated, because Drogo is wounded in a raid, and the wound festers. And despite everything Daenerys tries, including turning to a Maegi, a wise woman healer whose help comes with consequences that could not be clearly foreseen, she loses him. She loses the child she was carrying as well. She stands in the ashes of her husband's funeral pyre, and she makes a decision. The decision is to walk into the fire. She has carried with her since Viserys gave them to her as a wedding gift 3 large dragon eggs. Stone, or what was thought to be stone, petrified, ancient, from a line of eggs that had been in the Targaryen family for generations. And she puts them on the pyre, and she walks in, and the fire does not kill her. It never does, not really. Heat doesn't harm her in the way it harms others, though this particular detail will be more complicated in later seasons than it initially appears. When the morning comes and the fire has burned down to cinders, Daenerys is standing in the ashes, unhurt, and walking toward her are 3 things that have not existed in the world for over 150 years. Dragons. 3 of them, newborn, each one no larger than a cat, climbing over her arms and shoulders and making sounds that are half a cry and half something ancient and impossible. Black Drogon. Gold and cream Rhaegal. Pale Viserion, the color of bone. The Dothraki who had remained loyal to her, a small group, not the great army, fall to their knees. And Daenerys Targaryen, orphaned and widowed, and alone in the world except for these 3 impossible creatures and a handful of followers, begins. In the years that follow, across seasons 2 and 3 and into 4, she makes her way through the continent of Essos. She goes to the great city of Qarth, a trading hub of enormous wealth and considerable snobbery, where she navigates the politics of the 13 merchant princes and discovers that being the mother of dragons does not automatically translate into being treated with respect. She loses her dragons briefly, stolen by a warlock of the House of the Undying, and gets them back in the most spectacular possible fashion, because it turns out that even baby dragons are sufficient to burn a warlock alive if they are sufficiently motivated. She goes to Astapor on Slaver's Bay, a city that produces the Unsullied, perhaps the finest infantry soldiers in the world, slave soldiers trained from childhood in a brutal prowess that removes everything from them except skill and discipline and obedience. The slave master who sells them to her is condescending and cruel in that particular way that powerful men are when they believe they are dealing with someone who needs them more than they need her. He is condescending and cruel right up until the moment that Daenerys reveals she speaks High Valyrian and has been listening to every insult he delivered in what he assumed was a private language, and then she gives the Unsullied a single command: kill the masters, free the slaves. Drogon burns the slave master. The Unsullied, 8,000 of them, obey. And Daenerys walks away from Astapor as the breaker of chains, having given the Unsullied their freedom and asked them to fight for her as free men, the first free choice any of them had ever been offered. She frees Yunkai next, a similar city, run on similar cruelties. And then Meereen, the largest of the 3 slave cities, which falls to her forces after she fires the chains of 363 slave children, nailed to posts along the road as a message, by burying those children with proper funerals and aiming her catapults full of broken slave collars over the walls. When Meereen falls and its slaves pour into the streets, crying out for her, she climbs the pyramid above the city and stands against the sky, and the crowd below takes up a sound that becomes almost overwhelming. Mahisa, mother. She decides to stay. Not because it is the easy choice. It is not. Ruling a city built on institutions of slavery is enormously complicated. But because she has realized something. She has freed these people, but freeing people is not the same as building something for them. If she leaves, the old systems will return within the season. She needs to learn to govern, not just to conquer. Meereen becomes her classroom. It is a difficult classroom. It will teach her things she is not entirely ready to learn. But Daenerys Targaryen is patient, and she is learning, and her dragons are growing. Every day they are a little larger. Every day their shadows cover a little more ground when they stretch their wings. Part 4. The War of Five Kings and the Red Wedding. Back in Westeros, the death of Ned Stark has fractured the realm in ways that will take years to fully understand. Robb Stark marches south with an army of northern lords and wins battle after battle against the Lannister forces. He is genuinely gifted as a military commander, instinctive, adaptable, willing to take calculated risks that his more cautious opponents don't anticipate. His direwolf Grey Wind runs with him, an enormous gray beast that seems to understand tactics in some dim, animal way. Robb wins at Whispering Wood, capturing the Kingslayer himself. He wins at Oxcross. He keeps winning, and it matters very little, because the wars of this world are not won only on the battlefield. Robb needs passage across the Twins, a fortress and bridge controlled by Lord Walder Frey, an ancient, petulant man with an extraordinary number of daughters and a long memory for slights and obligations. The price Frey names for passage is a marriage. Robb must take one of Frey's daughters as his wife when the campaign is done. Robb agrees. He gives his word. He falls in love with Talisa Maegor, a healer he meets in the aftermath of a battle. A woman from Volantis across the sea who came to Westeros to practice medicine far from the slave economy of her home city. She is principled and direct and completely unlike anyone Robb has ever met. He marries her. He breaks his word to the Freys. This is not exactly a simple mistake. Robb knows it is a breach. He is not naive. He knows the cost of breaking an oath in a world built on them. He decides that Talisa is worth it, that love is worth it. And perhaps he is right, in the pure human terms of the decision. But the political mathematics of it are unforgiving. On his other side, Roose Bolton, his most important vassal, is growing less loyal by the season. Bolton is a pale, quiet man with a manner that sits just slightly wrong, like a painting hung at a small angle. Everything is technically correct, but something is off. He has been in communication with the Lannisters. He is playing a longer game than Robb knows. In the south, Stannis Baratheon, Robert's younger brother, grim and absolute and utterly humorless in his sense of duty, has declared himself the true king, his claim to the throne being stronger than Joffrey's by any honest reckoning, since Joffrey is not actually Robert's son. Stannis has a priestess, Melisandre, who serves the Lord of Light, a fire god from Essos, and who believes with absolute conviction that Stannis is the chosen one, the prince who was promised, the warrior of legend destined to save the world from the encroaching darkness. Stannis is not sure he believes any of that. He is sure that the throne is his by right. That is enough for him. Stannis attacks King's Landing in the Battle of the Blackwater, and here the young Tyrion Lannister, Cersei and Jaime's younger brother, born a dwarf, dismissed all his life by the family who should have loved him, possessed of one of the sharpest minds in Westeros, saves the city. He is serving as Hand of the King in his father's absence, and he deploys the wildfire, those stores that the Mad King had hidden beneath the city, as a naval trap, filling the harbor with green fire that burns Stannis' fleet to nothing. The battle is won, just barely, and Tyrion is almost killed in the fighting, slashed across the face in the chaos. His father arrives to take credit for the victory, because that is what Tywin Lannister does. Then comes the thing that the story will not let you forget. The thing that sits at the exact center of the first 3 seasons of Game of Thrones like a stone dropped into still water, with ripples spreading out in every direction. But before we get there, the world grows more complicated in ways that deserve their own moment of attention. Theon Greyjoy, who grew up at Winterfell as something between a ward and a hostage, a guarantee of his father Balon Greyjoy's good behavior after a failed rebellion years ago, makes a decision in Season 2 that will define him for the rest of the series. He goes to the Iron Islands at Robb's request, hoping to secure the Iron Fleet for the Northern cause. His father Balon rejects him. His sister Yara, a harder and more purely Ironborn character than Theon, who has never had to navigate the in-between space that Theon occupies, makes it clear that she has little patience for his attempts to reclaim an identity he was never allowed to fully inhabit. Theon, humiliated and desperate to prove himself, goes back to the north with Ironborn Reavers and takes Winterfell in Robb's absence. He takes the castle where he grew up, the only home he truly knows. He cannot hold it. His men are unreliable. Bran and Rickon escape. Theon fakes their deaths with the burned bodies of 2 farm boys, a decision of bottomless moral cowardice dressed as necessity. The Boltons come and pretend to take the castle for the Starks, and then do the exact opposite, and Theon is taken prisoner by Ramsay Bolton, who spends the better part of 2 seasons methodically dismantling his personality piece by piece until what remains is a creature called Reek, who cannot remember being anyone else. Theon Greyjoy's arc is the show's most sustained examination of guilt and identity, of what you do when you have done something you cannot undo, of whether the self survives that kind of dismantling, of whether recovery is possible for someone who participated in their own destruction as much as Ramsay participated in it. The answer the show gives is yes, with enormous qualifications and enormous cost. And the process of watching Theon reassemble himself from the ruins of Reek is one of the quieter, more careful things the later seasons do. Meanwhile, the broader war is generating new kings and new catastrophes on what feels like a monthly basis. Renly Baratheon, Robert's youngest brother, is charming and popular, and completely unsuited to the particular grimness that ruling in Westeros requires. He has a better claim to popular support than Stannis, but a worse claim by inheritance. He is killed by a shadow creature conjured by Melisandre from Stannis' blood, another dark application of the Lord of Light's power, before he can do much more than exist as the most pleasant possible alternative to everyone else currently claiming the crown. Stannis fights and loses at the Blackwater, retreats to Dragonstone, listens to Melisandre with increasing desperation, and makes increasingly terrible decisions as the shadow of failure lengthens around him. His wife Selyse is devout to the point of fanaticism. His daughter Shireen is sweet and gentle, and has been kept isolated at Dragonstone due to a bout of grayscale she survived as an infant, a disease that leaves a stone-like texture across the left side of her face. Shireen has taught herself to read in her isolation and has read everything available to her, which makes her one of the most educated people in the series. She teaches Davos Seaworth to read, and it is one of the small, warm things in a story full of cold, large ones. Stannis' sacrifice of Shireen at Melisandre's urging, burning his own daughter alive on a pyre in the snow of the north in order to gain the Lord of Light's favor in his campaign against the Boltons, is the moment where the show definitively closes the door on Stannis Baratheon as a sympathetic figure. He is a man of absolute principles who has arrived at an absolutely wrong conclusion. And the look on Shireen's face as she understands what is about to happen to her is one of those images the show places in you and does not remove. The favor gained from that sacrifice, if any was gained at all, does not last long. Stannis' army marches on Winterfell in the snow, and the Boltons ride out and destroy it. Stannis himself is killed by Brienne of Tarth, who has been searching for years for the man who was with Renly when Renly died. Then comes the Red Wedding. The Red Wedding. Robb Stark is traveling north to attend the wedding of his uncle Edmure Tully to one of Walder Frey's daughters, a renegotiated arrangement meant to partially repair the damage Robb's own broken oath had caused. He arrives at the twins with his army, his mother Catelyn, his pregnant wife Talisa. They are welcomed under the ancient laws of guest right, one of the most sacred customs in the known world. If a man offers you salt and bread under his roof, he has sworn your protection. You are his guest. You are safe. The wedding feast begins. Edmure and his new bride are led away after the ceremony, following the custom of bedding. The musicians begin to play. The tune they choose is a Lannister song, The Reigns of Castamere, a piece that tells the story of a house that challenged the Lannisters and was utterly destroyed for the presumption. It is not a subtle choice. Catelyn notices Rose Bolton wearing chainmail under his wedding finery. She grabs his wrist. She looks at his face. She understands, in the single most terrible moment of understanding in the entire series, exactly what is happening and exactly how powerless she is to stop it. The doors close. Talisa, who is pregnant with Robb's child, is stabbed first, repeatedly, deliberately, in the stomach. The intent is unambiguous and absolutely unforgivable. The Frey archers emerge from behind screens. The Stark men are cut down where they sit. Robb is shot with crossbow bolts. Catelyn takes an arrow in the back. Grey Wind dies outside in the courtyard, trapped and killed by crossbow fire before he can help anyone. Robb crawls across the floor to Talisa, and what he sees there breaks him so completely that when Rose Bolton bends down and drives a dagger into his heart, Robb barely responds. His last word, barely audible, is a single syllable: mother. Catelyn, who has watched all of this, who has lived through the fall of her husband and the loss of her sons, Bran and Rickon, who were reported murdered by Theon Greyjoy, who has held her family together through sheer force of maternal will. Catelyn Stark grabs Walder Frey's new young wife and puts a knife to her throat. She bargains with the last thing she has. She begs. She threatens. She does everything a mother can do. Walder Frey shrugs. Catelyn kills the girl. And then, mechanically, in a single movement, a Frey guard cuts Catelyn's throat. There is a silence, and then the river. The Red Wedding is not the end of the story, but it is the end of a particular kind of story. The story where the good people will probably win eventually if they work hard enough and fight smart enough. That story is over. What replaces it is something darker and more complicated, and, in the long run, closer to the truth of how the world actually operates. The Stark children who are scattered now, Arya, moving north with the Hound, Sansa, still trapped in King's Landing, Bran, heading far north towards something he can barely name, Jon, at the Wall, will carry what happened in different ways and rebuild themselves around different things. The name Stark will continue to mean something. It will mean something new. But first, they will all have to pass through a great deal of darkness to get anywhere at all. Part 5. Tyrion, Arya, and the world growing darker. Before we reach Season 4, there is something important that needs to be said about Sansa Stark, who has been living in King's Landing since before her father was killed, held there not in a dungeon, but in something perhaps more insidious. The gilded captivity of being betrothed to a king who enjoys cruelty the way some boys enjoy collecting insects. She has learned to perform serenity. She has learned to blank her face and compose her voice and say the right things at the right moments and give nothing away. Every day she has spent in the capital has been a lesson in survival conducted under threat of violence, and she has applied herself to that education with the same attentiveness she once brought to needlework and songs. She is not the naive girl who arrived dreaming of princes. She is something quieter and sharper and more dangerous than that, though no one in King's Landing has quite noticed yet. They see what she presents to them, which is exactly what she wants them to see. She is nearly given in marriage to Loras Tyrell. The plan is Littlefinger's, a way to move Sansa out of the capital. But Tywin Lannister intervenes and forces her instead to wed Tyrion. The marriage is not cruel, exactly. Tyrion is one of the few people at court who treats her as a person and has no particular interest in adding to her suffering. But it is not a marriage she chose, which in this world is hardly unusual. And it is a marriage that permanently marks her in the eyes of the world as a Lannister connection, which carries its own particular complications. Tyrion, to his credit, does not force what she is not willing to give, and Sansa, to hers, keeps to the terms of a difficult arrangement with more grace than the situation deserves. When Joffrey dies at his own wedding feast, Sansa is hustled out of the city by Dantos Hollard, a knight she showed mercy to once, and who has been secretly in Littlefinger's employ ever since, passing information and waiting for the right moment to be useful. She is taken to Littlefinger's ship in the harbor, and then to the Eyrie, the mountain stronghold of her aunt Lysa Arryn, and then into the orbit of Peter Baelish himself, which is, as it turns out, a very particular kind of danger dressed up as protection. Season 4 of Game of Thrones opens with an act that feels, at first, like simple symbolism. Tywin Lannister has ice, Ned Stark's ancestral Valyrian steel greatsword, melted down and reforged. 2 swords emerge from the ancient metal. He keeps one for the Lannisters. The other goes to his son Jaime, returned now from captivity, missing the hand that made him the greatest swordsman in the realm. It is, on one level, exactly what it appears to be. The Lannister patriarch erasing the Stark legacy, converting their heritage into something that serves Lannister ends. But there is something quietly devastating about watching that particular sword dissolved. Ice was a family heirloom in the truest sense. It was history made metal, and now it is gone, turned into something political. This is what the Lannisters do. They take what other people treasure and make it serve them. Joffrey Baratheon's wedding to Margaery Tyrell brings together 2 of the realm's most powerful families, and the feast that follows becomes one of the most satisfying scenes in the entire series, for reasons that have nothing to do with the menu. Someone poisons Joffrey at his own wedding. He dies badly, choking, convulsing, going purple, while his mother holds him and his new wife watches, and the guests stand frozen in horror. It is not clean. It is not dignified. It is the death of a person who made many people's lives miserable, and the camera does not look away. Tyrion is blamed. Cersei sees to that, with the conviction of a woman who needs someone to hate for the loss of her son. And Tyrion is the safest target available. She has been looking for reasons to destroy him his entire life. He is arrested and put on trial for a murder he did not commit. The trial is a performance, a set piece of injustice with the conclusion predetermined. Witness after witness, coached or coerced, testifies against him. The look on Tyrion's face as the proceedings continue and the walls close in is the look of a man who has spent his life being clever enough to survive the contempt of the world around him and is beginning to understand that cleverness has a ceiling. He demands a trial by combat. The champion who agrees to fight for him is Oberyn Martell, Prince of Dorne, a man who has been waiting years for an opportunity to confront the Mountain, the enormous soldier who serves the Lannisters and who, during the sack of King's Landing after the rebellion, killed Oberyn's sister Elia and her children. Oberyn doesn't just want to win the trial, he wants a confession. He wants to hear the Mountain admit what he did. The fight between Oberyn Martell and Gregor Clegane, the Mountain that rides, is one of the most electrifying things in the first 4 seasons of the show. Oberyn is faster than any man his size has a right to be, wielding a spear with a grace that is closer to dancing than fighting, circling the enormous mountain, landing blows, moving away before the counterstrike can land. He is winning. The crowd can see it. Tyrion can see it. You can almost see the confession being extracted, the Mountain on his knees, the fight about to end. And then Oberyn gets too close. He wants to hear the Mountain say the words, and he leans in, and the Mountain's hand closes around his head. And what follows is something the show does not allow you to look away from. Oberyn Martell dies. Tyrion's champion loses. Tyrion is condemned to die. He doesn't die. His brother Jaime, who has spent this season rebuilding himself in ways that no one expected, who protected Brienne of Tarth on the long road from captivity, who gave her a sword reforged from ice, and a mission to find and protect the Stark girls, who has been quietly becoming someone better than the person he was. Jaime helps Tyrion escape. He sends him with Varys toward a ship, but before Tyrion goes, he makes 2 stops. The first is to his father's chambers, where he finds the woman Tywin had promised was a common whore, Shae, the woman Tyrion loved and tried to protect and believed he had sent away to safety, in his father's bed. Shae tries to call for the guards. There is a struggle. Tyrion kills her. He does it. And the expression on his face afterward is the expression of someone who has crossed a line they cannot uncross, who has done something they will not be able to explain away, who is, in some fundamental sense, different now than they were a few minutes ago. Then he goes to find his father. Tywin Lannister is killed in the most ignoble location imaginable, seated on the privy, by a crossbow bolt fired by the son he spent decades dismissing. Tyrion looks at the body of his father, the man who controlled everything, the most powerful person in Westeros for a generation, cold and still and ordinary in death, and then he leaves. Across the sea, Arya has been traveling with Sandor Clegane, the Hound, and this unlikely pairing has become one of the show's genuine pleasures. They hate each other. They respect each other. They are completely honest with each other in a way that neither of them is accustomed to, because they have both decided the other one is too low or too strange to bother performing for. Arya has a list. She recites it quietly to herself some nights, a roll call of names, people who are going to die. The Hound is on it. He knows. He doesn't particularly seem to care. She is trying to get to the Eyrie, to her aunt Lysa Arryn. When they arrive, they discover that Lysa has died, pushed through the moon door by Littlefinger, who has been maneuvering in the Vale with his characteristic patience and who is, by this point, clearly operating on a very long game that only he fully understands. The Hound is grievously wounded in a fight with Brienne of Tarth, who has come looking for Sansa and found Arya instead. Arya won't go with Brienne. She doesn't trust anyone with a sword anymore, can't afford to. She leaves the Hound dying on a hillside, refusing to give him the mercy of a quick death. She catches a ship to Braavos. She has an iron coin and a phrase in High Valyrian, given to her by a man named Jaqen Hikar, back when the war was young and she was someone else. She says the words, Valar Morghulis, all men must die, and the ship takes her east. Part 6. The Wall, the Wildfire, and the Boy Who Was Something Else. At the Wall, things have been developing that the rest of Westeros has been too busy killing each other to pay attention to. Jon Snow joined the Night's Watch as planned, was trained, made friends, particularly with the perpetually anxious and wildly capable Samwell Tarly, a lord's son who failed to be the warrior his father wanted, but turns out to have a rare gift for both knowledge and loyalty, and was eventually captured by the Free Folk while on a mission beyond the Wall. The Free Folk, commonly called wildlings by those who consider themselves their betters, are a people who have lived beyond the Wall for thousands of years and are fiercely resistant to the idea of bending the knee to southern kings. They have been gathered, as our story enters its later chapters, under a single leader, Mance Rayder, the king beyond the Wall, a former Night's Watch deserter who has spent decades uniting the wildling clans into something resembling an army. Jon spends time among them. He meets Ygritte, a red-haired wildling woman with quick eyes and a sharp tongue and a knowledge of the world north of the Wall that makes Jon's prior understanding of it look like a child's doodle. They fall in love, genuinely, warmly, with the particular intensity that comes from falling in love in the middle of danger. Jon eventually has to choose between his vow to the Watch and her. He chooses the Watch. She tries to kill him 3 times afterward, and the anger behind those arrows speaks to how deeply she felt the betrayal. She forgives him, eventually, and then she is killed in the battle for Castle Black by an arrow from south of the Wall, fired by a wildling fighting on the northern side, but aimed in the wrong direction in the chaos. She dies in Jon's arms, saying the things she said to him when they were together in the world beyond the Wall, her particular gentle tease that contained all of their tenderness in it. You know nothing, Jon Snow. He knew something. He just didn't know enough. Beyond the Wall, Bran has been traveling with his companions, Mira and Jojen Reed, the children of Howland Reed, an old ally of Ned Stark, following a pull in his mind, a voice that calls him north towards something he can feel but not name. He is a warg, someone who can enter the minds of animals and see through their eyes and move them, a gift he discovered through his direwolf summer. But he is also something more. He is a greenseer. He can enter the weirwood trees, those ancient pale-barked trees with red leaves and carved faces that serve as the sacred sites of the old gods, and see through them across time and space. He is heading toward the last surviving greenseer, the three-eyed raven. The journey north of the Wall is arduous in a way that the show captures well, not through elaborate action sequences, but through sheer cold accumulation. The landscape becomes more hostile, more empty, more ancient. The cold is a presence rather than a condition. Jojen Reed, who pushed for this journey and has been guiding it with the calm certainty of someone who knows how it ends, grows weaker as they travel north, as though the destination is costing him something that he will not get back. He is a greenseer too, in his own smaller way, and he has seen his own death in the green visions that come to him, and he has come anyway. There is something in that, the decision to walk toward a thing you know is coming, because the thing itself matters enough, that sits with you. They are almost killed at a weirwood tree. A skeleton army attacks them from beneath the frozen ground, and Jojen is killed, his sister weeping, and burning his body before the whites can use it. And then a girl emerges and hurls fireballs with her hands, and she is a child of the forest, one of the original non-human inhabitants of Westeros, small and ancient and strange-looking, and undeniably real, in a way that everything north of the Wall keeps turning out to be. She leads them to the cave. He finds him beneath a great weirwood tree in a cave deep in the frozen north, an ancient man grown into the roots of the tree, more tree than man now, waiting. And what the three-eyed raven tells Bran is this: you will never walk again, but you will fly. Bran is 10 years old and has not walked in 4 years, and this sentence sits in him like a gift and a sentence at the same time. The training Bran undergoes over the following season involves entering the past, really entering it, not watching it like a film, but being present in it the way air is present in a room, invisible and real, capable of perceiving everything but unable to change anything. He watches his father as a young man, going through the rituals of old Winterfell, the living Starks in the living castle before everything went wrong. He watches battles. He watches births. He watches the deep past, when the world was younger and stranger, and the children of the forest were numerous in the forests of Westeros. He learns that the past is not actually past. It is accessible. It is present in the Weirwood network, preserved in the memory of the trees, held there for anyone with the right kind of sight to find. The danger of this gift, as the three-eyed raven keeps warning him, is that you can get lost in it. Time in the visions is not the same as time in the waking world. You can stay too long. You can go too deep. Bran, being Bran, does this. He touches the Night King in a vision and wakes up with a mark on his arm, a mark that means the Night King can find him now, wherever he is. The protective magic of the cave is broken. What follows is the death of the three-eyed raven, killed in the assault on the cave by the Night King's army of the dead. The death of the last of the children of the forest. The death of Hodor and the revelation of why his name is Hodor, in a time loop moment of astonishing, terrible invention, Bran is simultaneously present in a past vision and warged into Hodor in the present, and the past and present collapse on each other, and a young man named Willos is caught in the moment between the two, hearing Mira's desperate command to hold the door, hold the door, hold the door, and the words collapse into each other, the way time has collapsed, and what remains is all that Willis will be able to say for the rest of his life. Hodor, hold the door. He holds the door. The dead take him. Bran escapes into the storm with Mira, the new three-eyed raven now, carrying everything the old one held, every secret, every vision, every moment of the past. Arya, meanwhile, arrives in Braavos and finds the House of Black and White, a temple at the edge of the city built of alternating black and white stone, tended by a religious order called the Faceless Men. These are assassins, but calling them assassins is a bit like calling a cathedral a building. Technically correct, massively inadequate. The Faceless Men are servants of the many-faced God, the God of death, who they believe is the only true God, present in every religion, wearing different faces, the stranger of the faith of the Seven, the drowned god of the Iron Islands, the great other that the Red God's followers oppose. All of these, they believe, are one God, and that God's gift is death. They do not kill for money, exactly, though there is payment involved. They are the instrument of death for those whose time has come, as determined by the many-faced God's will. To join them, you must give up everything. Your name, your history, your face, literally. They can wear the faces of the dead, changing their appearance the way other people change their clothes. You must become no one. Arya's training is long and difficult, and involves more violence and deception than she expected even from an assassin cult. She is consistently told by Jaqen H'ghar, who reappears as her teacher, or perhaps has been her teacher all along, wearing different faces, that she is not ready to be no one, that she is still Arya Stark. She agrees, privately. She is still Arya Stark. She keeps her sword needle, the one Jon gave her before he went to the wall, hidden where the Faceless Men can't find it, because even when she has decided she can give up everything, she cannot give up needle. She is blinded for a period, a punishment, and a teaching. She learns to fight without sight. She fights the waif, another young woman within the Order who seems to bear a particular hostility toward Arya, and in their final confrontation, the waif given permission to kill Arya for having deviated from assigned targets. Arya leads her into the dark and kills her there, because she has learned that the dark is not something to be afraid of. She puts needle through the candle. Jaqen H'ghar inspects the evidence and declares her training complete. She is no one. She says, no. A girl is Arya Stark of Winterfell, and I am going home. He lets her go. There is a look on his face, or rather, the face he is wearing, that might be satisfaction, as though this is exactly the outcome he was hoping for all along. Jon Snow, meanwhile, has been elected Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, narrowly by a single vote, cast dramatically by Samwell Tarly in the middle of the count, and has been making decisions that are controversial and necessary and that are going to get him killed. He makes peace with the wildlings. He opens the gates of Castle Black and lets tens of thousands of people through, people who have been considered enemies of the realm for centuries, because he understands something that his fellow officers of the Watch do not. The army of the dead is real. The White Walkers are coming. And it doesn't matter which side of the wall you are on when they arrive, if the wall is all that stands between you and them. He sees this most clearly at a place called Hardhome, where he has gone with a fleet of ships to evacuate wildlings before the dead army reaches them. They are loading the boats. And then the weather changes. The temperature drops 50 degrees in the span of a moment. The fog comes in, gray and thick and wrong. And then over the ridge, pouring down through the gates of the wildling settlement, comes the dead. Tens of thousands of whites, corpses reanimated by the Night King's power, moving with a terrible uniform purpose. The battle is chaos and horror, and Jon fights through it in the grinding, desperate way that the show handles these things best. Not cleanly, not heroically, but with the persistent animal determination of someone who has decided they are not going to die today. He kills a White Walker with his Valyrian steel sword, Longclaw, and discovers something important. Valyrian steel can destroy them, the way Dragonglass can. The army of the dead has a weakness. But at the end of the battle, after he has put as many people on the boats as he can, Jon Snow watches from the sea. The Night King stands on the dock. He watches Jon watch him. Then he raises his arms, slowly, like a conductor beginning an overture. And every person who died at Hardhome rises. Every wildling who didn't make it. Every Night's Watch brother. Every old man and woman who fell. All of them, standing on the shore, blue eyes open. The Night King looks at Jon Snow across the water, and then lowers his arms, and the dead turn and march. Jon is back at Castle Black when his brothers in the Night's Watch, who never wanted peace with the wildlings and believe he has betrayed them all, ask him to read a note. He leans over it. The daggers come in, one after another. "For the Watch," each one says as they plant their knives. His steward Ollie, the boy he trusted, goes last. Jon Snow falls. He dies in the snow. He does not stay dead. Part 7, Kings and Queens, Fire and Salt, Season 6. Begins with Jon Snow dead in the snow of Castle Black's courtyard, and for several episodes, the show genuinely makes you sit with that. It doesn't rush the resurrection. It makes you feel the absence of him, makes you watch the people around him, Davos Seaworth especially, a knight who believed in him with a simplicity and constancy that has no calculation in it. Navigate the despair of that loss. Melisandre is in Castle Black. The Red Woman, as she is known, who burns with absolute conviction that Stannis Baratheon was the chosen savior of the world, and who is now grappling with the fact that she watched Stannis die in the snow of the north after his campaign ended in catastrophe, including his decision, at Melisandre's urging, to sacrifice his own daughter Shireen on a pyre to give him victory in battle. A decision so monstrous it caused his own men to desert him. Melisandre, without Stannis, is a woman in freefall. Her faith is not shaken so much as it has been detonated. Davos persuades her to try. She doesn't know if it will work. She has done it once before, or something like it. She washes Jon's body and cuts his hair and says the words and waits, and it doesn't work. And she leaves the room. And then Ghost, Jon's direwolf, lifts his head. And Jon Snow's eyes open. He comes back gasping, the way drowning people come back when you pull them out of water, clutching at the air, disoriented and raw, and not quite sure yet what has happened to him. "What did you see?" Davos asks him later, when he is calmer. Jon is very quiet for a moment. He says, "Nothing. There was nothing, just darkness." He executes the men who killed him, 4 of them, including young Ollie, and the expression on Jon's face as the rope drops is the expression of a man leaving something behind, a version of himself that believed enough in redemption to hesitate. And then he tells Ed Tolet to take command of the Watch. His watch is ended. He died. His oath was fulfilled by death. He is free now, in the most technical and final sense of the word. Sansa arrives at Castle Black not long after, with Brienne of Tarth, who found her at last. She has escaped from the most recent chapter of her captivity. She was given in marriage to Ramsay Bolton, the monstrous natural son of Rose Bolton, who helped murder her brother, a man whose cruelty had a playful quality to it that made it worse rather than better. She escaped with Theon Greyjoy, who had been Ramsay's tortured prisoner for years and had to reassemble himself as a person from approximately nothing before he could function at all. The reunion of Jon and Sansa is one of the quieter, more genuine moments in the middle seasons of the show. They were never particularly close as children. Sansa and Jon occupied different worlds, and Catelyn's treatment of Jon created a distance between her children and Ned's bastard that was never entirely bridged. But here they are, both of them having survived things no person should have to survive, and the recognition between them is simple and complete and human. They hold each other in the snow outside Castle Black and don't say much at all, and it is more affecting for the silence. Sansa has intelligence that they need. The Boltons hold Winterfell. Rickon is Ramsay's prisoner. They have to take it back. In the south, the political landscape is shifting dramatically. Cersei has been stripped of her power by the Faith Militant, a religious fundamentalist movement within the Faith of the Seven that gained enormous influence when Cersei, in an act of staggering short-sightedness that she will spend the rest of the series paying for, gave them military authority in order to neutralize the Tyrells. The Faith Militant arrested Margaery, Cersei's daughter-in-law, on charges of perjury. They also arrested Cersei herself, on charges of adultery and incest with Lancel Lannister, her cousin. Cersei languishes in a cell while the city moves on without her, and when she is finally released, it is with the condition of a walk of atonement. Stripped of her clothing, hair roughly shorn, she must walk barefoot through the streets of King's Landing, from the Great Sept to the Red Keep, accompanied by a septa ringing a bell and calling out one word over and over while the crowd screams abuse at her. Shame, shame, shame. Cersei walks every step of it with her chin up and her eyes open, taking in every face, recording every name, cataloging everything for later. She arrives at the Red Keep's gates, bloody-footed and white-faced, and her bodyguard Sir Gregor Clegane, the Mountain, revived from near death by Qyburn's experiments into something that is barely human anymore, wraps her in a cloak. She says nothing. She doesn't need to. The expression says it all. Season 6 ends in the most spectacular fashion, in an episode called The Winds of Winter. And what Cersei does is so precisely calculated and so comprehensively terrible that it demands to be described carefully. She has spent months preparing. While the Faith Militant has been arranging her trial, a trial she knows she cannot win, not because she is guilty, though she is, but because the High Sparrow controls the proceedings and has no interest in a verdict of innocence. She has been working with Qyburn and his network of child informants, the Little Birds. She has been mapping the tunnels beneath King's Landing. She has been counting the wildfire caches that the Mad King secreted under the city all those years ago. On the day of the trial, the Great Sept of Baelor fills with the biggest gathering of high-born Westeros has seen in years. The High Sparrow and his Faith Militant. Lord Mace Tyrell and his daughter Margaery, newly devout. Kevin Lannister. Half the city's noble families. Cersei is conspicuously absent. Margaery notices first. She is intelligent enough to see the pattern, the absence, the strange behavior of the acolytes, the way the doors have been quietly bolted. She starts moving people toward the exits. She argues with the High Sparrow. She says we need to leave. We need to leave right now. The wildfire ignites. The entire Sept of Baelor goes up in a column of green fire visible from every corner of the city. Cersei watches from the heights of the Red Keep with a cup of wine, and the expression on her face is a complicated thing. It is not exactly happiness. It is something closer to the expression of a person who has finally stopped waiting. Her son Tommen, who had genuinely loved Margaery and had genuinely tried to be a good king with limited tools and limited support and the world working against him at every turn, watches the Sept explode from his window. He removes his crown. He steps up to the windowsill. He steps off. Cersei's third and last child is dead. She has told Jaime, years ago, that they will always have each other, that nothing else matters as long as they have each other. She sits on the Iron Throne in the ashes of everything and is crowned Queen of the Seven Kingdoms, because there is literally no one left to object with sufficient force. And the expression on her face is the expression of a woman who has gotten everything she wanted and is very clearly not at peace. In the north, Jon and Sansa raise a small army, the Wildlings, Lyanna Mormont's 62 fighters from Bear Island, a scattering of loyal northern houses, and march on Winterfell. The Battle of the Bastards is one of the most visceral things in television history, directed by Miguel Sapochnik, who filmed 25 days of footage with 600 extras and built something that looks less like a television battle and more like being inside one. Jon charges Ramsay's 6,000 men with 2,400 of his own, and it goes wrong almost immediately. The Bolton cavalry flanks, the shields close in. The bodies of the dead pile up, and men begin to be crushed alive inside them. Jon is in the center of it, surrounded, the air solid with violence. And for several terrible minutes, there is the genuine sense that this is it. This is where he dies. The horn sounds from the south. The Knights of the Vale arrive. Sansa had written secretly to Peter Baelish and asked for the Vale's army, a decision she made without telling Jon because she wasn't sure he would agree, and which he is quietly furious about even as he is alive because of it. Ramsay's lines break. Ramsay retreats to Winterfell. Wun, the giant, breaks the gate, the last act he will ever perform. Jon beats Ramsay unconscious with his own fists, with the kind of violence that is clearly not just military necessity, but something more personal and more human than that. Sansa decides Ramsay's fate. She locks him in the kennel with his own hunting dogs, dogs he has kept half-starved. Ramsay laughs. He tells her the dogs would never hurt him. He looks at her with the particular contempt of someone who has always been able to frighten everyone around him. The dogs are very hungry. Sansa walks away from the kennel. The sounds behind her are not pleasant. There is a small smile on her face, and whether you find it satisfying or troubling or both, probably says something about how the show has shaped you over the course of 6 seasons. Bran, in the north, is receiving the final lessons of the three-eyed raven, seeing into the past with perfect clarity, witnessing events as they actually happened. And he visits the Tower of Joy, the tower where his father went at the end of the rebellion, with several companions, to face the Kingsguard who had inexplicably remained guarding a tower rather than fighting for their king. What was in that tower? What secret was so important that Sir Arthur Dayne, the greatest knight of his generation, stood guard over it while a war was lost? Bran sees his father climb the stairs. He sees a door. He hears a voice from behind it, a voice he recognizes because it belongs to his aunt, Lyanna Stark, Robert Baratheon's betrothed, Ned's younger sister, the young woman whose disappearance with Prince Rhaegar Targaryen was the act that ignited Robert's rebellion. She was supposed to have been kidnapped. She was supposed to have been a prisoner. She is dying in a bed, having just given birth, and she takes Ned's hands and she whispers, "Promise me, Ned, promise me." And the baby, whose face we almost see before Bran is pulled back from the vision, we know. We know who that baby is. We know the entire context of everything about Jon Snow's life just shifted on its axis. He is not a bastard. His name is Aegon Targaryen. His mother was Lyanna Stark. His father was Rhaegar Targaryen, the prince who the entire rebellion was fought to punish. The man everyone in Westeros has been taught to consider a villain for abducting and presumably assaulting a young woman. Only he didn't. They loved each other. They were married in secret. And the child they had together, the child that Ned Stark claimed as his own bastard son, protected from Robert's certain revenge, raised in the cold halls of Winterfell as a boy with no name that mattered, is the last legitimate heir of House Targaryen. The heir to the Iron Throne. Part 8. The Dragon Queen Comes West Season 7. Of Game of Thrones compresses the timeline considerably, and the result is a season that moves at a pace that requires the audience to hold on rather than settle in. Everything accelerates. The pieces that have been drifting across the board for 6 years begin to converge. Daenerys finally arrives in Westeros. She lands at Dragonstone, the ancient island fortress carved from black volcanic stone into the shapes of dragons by the Valyrian mages who built it, the westernmost outpost of the Valyrian freehold, the place where her family's great conquest of the 7 kingdoms began. She comes with the Unsullied. She comes with the Dothraki. She comes with ships courtesy of Yara and Theon Greyjoy, whose father Balan died, and whose uncle Euron took the Iron Islands from them. She comes with Tyrion as her hand, and she comes with 3 dragons the size of small planes, each one larger than the last time we saw them, each one carrying a name and a history, and a portion of what Daenerys has become. Jon Snow comes to Dragonstone to ask Daenerys for access to the island's deposits of dragonglass. Sam Tarly found in the Citadel's records that Dragonstone sits on an enormous vein of it, and dragonglass can kill the White Walkers, and Jon needs it. The meeting between Jon and Daenerys is one of the more carefully written scenes in Season 7, because they are so exactly alike in ways that neither of them can see. Both have been raised to a position of leadership they did not ask for. Both believe genuinely in the responsibility that comes with power. Both are committed to a cause bigger than themselves. Both have, at different moments, been resurrected or reborn by fire, in one way or another. They circle each other, testing, pushing back, not trusting, and underneath it all, the most gradual warmth. Daenerys asks Jon to bend the knee. Jon says the North will not bend the knee to anyone it has not chosen. They argue about which of them is asking the other for something they cannot give. Neither of them will quite acknowledge that they admire the other for the stubbornness. The beginning of her Westeros campaign is powerful. She burns the Lannister supply train in what becomes known as the Loot Train attack, riding Drogon into battle for the first time over the Westerosi mainland. And what she does to the Lannister and Tarly forces on that road is a demonstration of exactly what a dragon represents in war. Not just fire, the psychological dimension of fire from above, the absolute dissolution of whatever order and discipline trained soldiers have when something that size is coming at them from the sky. It is a masterclass in dragonfire as a strategic weapon, and Daenerys looks, riding it, like someone who has arrived at the thing she was always moving toward. But her alliance unravels faster than it forms. Cersei has developed scorpion weapons, enormous crossbow-like devices capable of piercing dragon scales at range, and her naval commander Euron Greyjoy destroys Daenerys' fleet with them, capturing Yara and killing her Dornish allies. The Tyrells are neutralized when Cersei takes Highgarden. Suddenly, Daenerys' grand coalition has collapsed, and she is fighting Cersei essentially alone. Then comes the mission north. The idea, Tyrion's idea, which he will later describe as one of the most catastrophically bad ideas of his life, is to bring a living white back to King's Landing, as proof for Cersei that the army of the dead is real, and the war for the living must supersede all political conflict. If Cersei could see with her own eyes, the argument goes, surely she would agree to a truce. The small band that goes north, Jon, Jorah, the Hound, Beric Dondarrion, Tormund, Gendry, a few others, is the kind of team that could only be assembled at this particular moment in history, when the various threads of the story have wound around each other long enough to put people together who would have been on opposite sides of everything a few years earlier. It requires going north of the Wall. Jon Snow and a small team travel into the frozen wilderness and capture a White. But while they are surrounded by the dead army, waiting on a frozen lake for rescue, the Night King raises his arm and launches an ice spear. Viserion, one of Daenerys' 3 dragons, is hit. He falls screaming out of the sky and crashes through the ice into the frozen water below. And the sound he makes as he falls is one of the most affecting moments in the season, because you have known these dragons since they were the size of cats, and you have watched them grow, and Viserion dying sounds like something that should not be happening in the world. The Night King's army pulls the dead dragon from the lake. The Night King touches his snout. Viserion's eyes open, blue as winter, and he rises. The Night King has a dragon. In the south, Bran finally tells Sam Tarly what he has seen. Sam has his own piece of the puzzle, a discovery by his girlfriend Gilly, reading through old records at the Citadel, about a secret annulment and remarriage that suggests Rhaegar and Lyanna were married, making their son legitimate. Sam and Bran put the pieces together. Jon Snow's name is Aegon Targaryen. He is the legitimate heir to the Iron Throne. His claim supersedes Daenerys's. He and Daenerys, who have met at Dragonstone and have been developing feelings for each other, with the slow inevitability of people who are very alike in ways that matter, principled, genuinely committed to something beyond personal ambition, are, in addition to everything else, aunt and nephew. This information sits waiting, a bomb that has not yet detonated, as the season ends with its final image. The Night King riding the undead Viserion, blue fire pouring from the dragon's ruined throat, destroying the wall at Eastwatch. 300 miles of ice and ancient magic come down in a column of cold blue fire. The army of the dead walks through. The long night has begun. Part 9. The long night, Winterfell prepares for the end of the world. Everyone who matters in this story is here now, or close to it. Jon and Daenerys, their relationship newly physical and newly complicated by what Bran has revealed. Sansa, ruling the North in Jon's absence. Watching Daenerys arrive with a complicated expression on her face and a sharper political instinct than anyone fully credits. Arya, who has come home at last, who walks through Winterfell and relearns the shape of it, older now and carrying things that are not visible. Bran in the God's Wood, watching everything, saying very little, giving the impression of a person who sees all the chess pieces and is not entirely on the same side as any of them. The night before the battle, small fires are lit and people sit together and say the things they have not said. Jaime Lannister is here. He came north despite Cersei's orders because he made a promise to fight in the Great War, regardless of his personal circumstances. And Jaime has been trying, for years now, to become someone who keeps his promises. Brienne sits beside him. He knights her, in the old way, by firelight, and the look on her face when it is done is the look of someone who has wanted something for a very long time and had decided not to want it anymore and is suddenly having it anyway. Theon Greyjoy is here, having freed his sister Yara from Euron's captivity and then sailing north because this is where he needs to be. He and Sansa say hello to each other, and there are years and entire worlds of complicated history in the brief time they stand in the same room, and they manage it with a grace that is genuinely moving. Sam gives Jon his sword. Jorah Mormont, who has loved Daenerys in the faithful, undemanding way that some people love, who has been exiled and restored and been at her side through things that would have ended lesser men, is here. Podrick Payne, who has grown from a fumbling squire into a genuine fighter. Lyanna Mormont, 12 years old and smaller than everyone around her, facing the end of everything with an expression of absolute resolution. The Battle of Winterfell, the long night, the great confrontation that 8 seasons have been building toward. It is long and dark and overwhelming, and it asks more of the show's visual grammar than anything it has done before. The cinematography has been criticized for being too dark to see clearly, which is technically valid, and which also somewhat misses the point, which is that in this battle you are not supposed to be able to see clearly. You are supposed to feel what the characters feel. Confused, overwhelmed, desperate, fighting things you cannot see, in a darkness that seems to come from everywhere at once. Daenerys and Jon ride the dragons into the storm, looking for the Night King, and what they find is a night sky full of clouds so thick that the dragons lose each other in them. The Dothraki charge first, their araks lit by Melisandre's fire, and for a few seconds the flaming weapons carry forward into the dark, and then one by one they go out. And the silence that follows is one of the most quietly devastating moments in the episode. The Dothraki fought every battle they ever entered. They charged things that would have made other armies break and run, and they rode into the dark, and the dark consumed them. The dead pour over Winterfell's walls. The living die. Grey Worm holds the outside bridges as long as he can. Ed Tollett is killed. Beric Dondarrion is killed, fulfilling the purpose he was given. He protected Arya, and that was what he was meant for. Lyanna Mormont is killed by a giant wight, and the little girl who has stared down kings without blinking drives her dagger through the giant's eye even as she dies, and it is the death of something particular in the world, something fierce and good. Melisandre walks along the battlements and lights the trench that encircles Winterfell, giving them precious minutes. She says the words and holds her hands out, and nothing happens. And there is a moment where her face shows the full weight of a person whose faith has been tested beyond recovery. And then the fire comes, and the dead stop at the edge of it. And the defenders breathe, briefly. The dead come through anyway. They pile on each other, living wights climbing on the bodies of burning wights until the flames are covered and the passage opens. Inside the castle, in the crypts, the dead Starks rise. Because the Night King's power does not stop at walls, because the dead are the dead regardless of where they were sleeping. The women and children who were sheltering in what everyone thought was safety find themselves fighting in the dark, with torch flames and belt knives against people they may have known in life. And it is terrible in a particular intimate way that the surface battle cannot quite replicate. Jorah Mormont dies in the last moments of the battle, defending Daenerys, cut down by the wights, dying with her arms around him and his face pointed at the sky. He is smiling. Theon Greyjoy, who is defending Bran in the Godswood, who has been fighting the dead for what feels like hours, is the last man standing when the Night King walks through the weirwood trees. The Night King, surrounded by his White Walker lieutenants, regards Theon Greyjoy with the particular patience of something that has existed for 8,000 years and finds human stubbornness mildly interesting. Theon takes a breath. He charges. The Night King grabs his spear in one hand and drives it through him without apparent effort. Theon Greyjoy dies running at an enemy he knew he could not beat, and it is exactly right that this is how he goes. The Night King reaches for Bran. Bran looks up at him, those white-blue eyes. And then something drops from the shadows. Arya Stark. She has fought her way through the entire castle, through the crypts where the dead Starks rose and terrorized the people sheltering there, through everything, with the same compressed, coiled, forward-moving energy that has defined her since she was 9 years old and decided she did not want to sit still. She has a Valyrian steel dagger, the dagger that was used in the attempt on Bran's life way back in Season 1, the dagger that passed through Catelyn's hand in Ned's investigation and eventually into Bran's, who gave it to Arya at Winterfell. The Night King catches her by the throat. She drops the dagger from one hand, catches it with the other, drives it into him. He shatters. All the White Walkers shatter. Every White collapses simultaneously. The entire army of the dead falls in one moment. Because the Night King created all of them, and the Night King is gone. 8,000 years of slowly accumulating threat, ended by a girl with a knife in the dark. Arya Stark. There is a quiet that follows that battle that is almost unbearable in its completeness. The sound of wind and fire and distant weeping. The sun comes up, eventually, over a field of still bodies, and the survivors move through them slowly, looking for faces they recognize. There are not enough faces they recognize. There are not enough people left at all. They burn the dead. The great funeral pyres light the sky north of Winterfell, and the people who are still standing watch the flames and think whatever thoughts people think when they have looked at the absolute worst thing and come through it. The war for humanity is over. 8,000 years of threat resolved in a single night, and now the other war, the smaller, human, entirely avoidable war for a chair, reasserts itself. The world does not stay saved for very long. It never does. Part 10. The bells, the ashes, and the end. The war for the living is won. The long night is survived. And now the story returns to the question it began with, before the dead and the dragons and the mythology and the revelation about Jon Snow's parentage, the question that Ned Stark died trying to answer. Who should sit on the Iron Throne? Daenerys has lost so much. Jorah is dead. Missandei, her closest friend, the translator and counselor who has been at her side since Astapor, whose quiet dignity made her one of the most graceful presences in the series, has been captured by Cersei's forces in the weeks after Winterfell, when Daenerys' fleet was ambushed by Euron Greyjoy. And Rhaegal, her second remaining dragon, is killed by Euron's scorpions from an ambush at sea. He falls from the sky bleeding, and she watches him die. When Daenerys arrives at the walls of King's Landing with the intention of getting Missandei back, Cersei has her brought to the battlements. She has her executed in full view of Daenerys and Grey Worm and everyone else. Missandei's last word, spoken before the mountain kills her, is Dracarys, the old High Valyrian command for fire. Daenerys goes quiet after that. A stillness comes over her that those who know her find more frightening than anger. Tyrion tries, genuinely and desperately, to find a way out of what he can see coming. He negotiates. He reasons. He makes the case to Daenerys that she is not her father, that she can still be what she set out to be. He makes the case to Cersei that she can surrender and live, that the bells of the city can ring before the bloodshed begins. He believes in both of them more than the evidence quite justifies. Jon Snow goes south because Daenerys asks him to, and because, whatever he has been through, he has not yet reached the conclusion that she has become dangerous. He loves her, not with the measured calculation of politics, but with the genuine warmth of a person who found in her someone whose values seem to match his own. He does not want to see what is coming. The Battle of King's Landing is decisive. Daenerys, on Drogon, dismantles Euron's scorpion-equipped fleet before they can fire a shot, because she learned from Rhaegal's death, and this time she approaches from the sun. She burns the Iron Fleet. She burns the scorpions on the walls. She burns the Golden Company, 20,000 mercenaries hired by Cersei from across the Narrow Sea, in the streets before they can form formations. The Lannister forces, their defenses gone, their leadership crumbling, ring the bells. The city surrenders. The bells ring. The white flag is essentially out. The war is over. And Daenerys hears the bells and looks down at the city, and she does not stop. What happens next in King's Landing is something that the show has been building toward for 8 years. The culmination of every warning about Targaryen fire and blood. Every hint that the path of pure conquest and the path of liberation are not always the same path. Daenerys burns King's Landing, not the fortifications, not the remaining soldiers, the city, the civilian areas, The streets where people are running and the bells are still ringing. Street after street, district after district, she and Drogon go back and forth, and the largest city in the world, home to 1 million people, goes up in fire. Jon and his forces, who were supposed to hold position until the city surrendered, find themselves in a burning city with no clear orders and no clear purpose. The Unsullied and the Dothraki, who follow Daenerys, take their queen's actions as sanction for their own. Grey Worm, whose rage has nowhere left to go after Missandei's death, kills surrendering soldiers. Jon tries to stop his own men from joining in and fails, and eventually his voice is lost in the fire. The Hound fights his brother Gregor in the burning Red Keep, the Clegane Bowl that fans anticipated for years, and both of them fall through the collapsing floor into the fire below, the Mountain finally killed by the flames he has been associated with his entire career of violence. It is the fight that had to happen, and Sandor Clegane knows it and walks toward it with the same resignation he has carried since he was a child, and his brother burned half his face off for the crime of playing with a toy. Jaime, who left Cersei at the end of Season 7 and came north and tried to become someone different, goes back south. He goes back to Cersei. Because whatever he has built himself into, however much he has changed, he cannot watch her die alone. He finds her in the Red Keep and takes her through the tunnels toward the boats they planned as an escape, and the Red Keep comes down on both of them. Cersei and Jaime Lannister die in each other's arms in the dark, buried under the collapse, and the last thing they have is each other. Daenerys stands in the ruins of King's Landing the next morning, on the steps of the Red Keep. Drogon spread behind her like enormous wings, and she speaks to the people who are still willing to listen. She has freed the people of King's Landing, she says. She will free the whole world. She will break the wheel entirely. What the people of King's Landing went through yesterday, she names it liberation. She names it the first day of the new world. Jon looks at Tyrion, and Tyrion looks at Jon, and they both understand what they are looking at. Not just what she did yesterday, what she might do tomorrow. What she will do again and again to every city that does not submit to her vision of a better world. Tyrion tells Jon, "The woman who burned that city will do it again if she thinks it's necessary. Your love for her does not make her safe for the world. The fact that she means it, the fact that she genuinely believes she is liberating the people she burns, does not make her safe for the world. Sometimes the most dangerous person is the one who is absolutely certain they are right." Jon goes to Daenerys. She is in the throne room, and the Iron Throne is behind her, and the snow has drifted down through the ruined ceiling and settled on everything. She reaches out and touches the throne with the expression of someone touching something they have been moving toward their entire life. She invites Jon to share the new world with her. He holds her. He says he loves her. He drives a dagger into her heart. He holds her as she dies, the same way he held Ygritte in the snow beyond the wall, the same way the people in this story always seem to hold the ones they love when the holding comes too late. Drogon pushes through the wall, enormous, furious, and for a moment you are genuinely unsure what he will do. He circles Jon. He examines what has happened, and then he breathes fire, not at Jon, but at the Iron Throne, melting it, dissolving it into nothing. Whether this is instinct or something more considered, we can't know, but it is exactly right. The throne that killed so many people, that warped so many lives, that the world has been arranging itself around for 3 centuries, is gone. Drogon picks up Daenerys' body and flies east, last spotted, heading toward Volantis. A council of lords meets in the Dragon Pit weeks later, with Grey Worm standing watch and Tyrion in chains, to decide who will rule. Sam Tarly proposes that the lords and ladies of the realm simply choose their king, the way the Night's Watch used to choose their Lord Commander. He is laughed at. But when Tyrion proposes Bran Stark, Bran who remembers everything, Bran who can see through space and time, Bran who is, uniquely among everyone in this world, incapable of wanting power for its own sake, because he has evolved well past wanting things for himself. The lords consider it, and then they vote. Bran Stark becomes King Bran the Broken, ruler of the 6 kingdoms. Sansa demands independence for the North, and she gets it. She is crowned queen in the North, the thing she was always moving toward without knowing it, a ruler who learned everything she knows from the worst people in the worst situations and used it to become extraordinary. Jon Snow is sent back to the Night's Watch, a political compromise to prevent Grey Worm's Unsullied from demanding his head for killing Daenerys. And then beyond the wall as part of the agreement, he goes. The Night's Watch exists only in technical terms. The wall is down and the White Walkers are gone, and there is nothing to guard anymore. He walks north with Tormund and Ghost. Ghost, his direwolf, who he gives a proper greeting to at last, that quiet apology that the reunion deserved, and the free folk who are returning to their lands. He goes beyond the wall into the woods, among the trees in the blue morning light, and the expression on his face is not the expression of exile, it is the expression of someone going home. Arya Stark does not stay in Westeros. She has crossed every name off her list. The last Freymen killed at a dinner, wearing Walder Frey's face, a scene of such cold efficiency that it is almost abstract in its completeness, a reckoning delivered so perfectly that it would have seemed like myth if anyone had survived to tell the story as myth. She sits in the great hall and watches them drink her wine, and then she tells them who she is, Arya Stark of Winterfell. And then the wine takes them and she walks out into the morning. She goes to the docks of King's Landing and gets on a ship. She is going to see what is west of Westeros, the map's end. No one knows what's there. Arya Stark is going to find out. Part 11, What It All Meant. Game of Thrones is a story about the stories we tell about power. Every civilization builds myths around the way it is organized. Every kingdom tells a story about why the king is king. Because the gods chose him, because he was born to it, because he is stronger or wiser or more beloved than the alternatives. These stories are almost never entirely true, and the people at the top of the hierarchy know it, and the people at the bottom often sense it. And everyone agrees to maintain the narrative because the alternative is chaos. George R. Martin, whose series of novels the show is based on, has always been interested in what happens when those stories break down. What happens when the knight in shining armor is also capable of pushing a child out a window to protect a secret? What happens when the liberator who chains herself to nothing and fears nothing gradually becomes the thing she set out to destroy? What happens when the person who spent 8 years being the most likely candidate for greatness turns out to be best suited to disappear into the wilderness and leave the thrones to someone who doesn't particularly want one? There is something the show keeps returning to, in its best moments, about the difference between the stories we tell about events and the reality of how those events feel from the inside. Ned Stark is an honorable man by the standards of every story that values honor, and yet from the inside, his honor is not a principled stand so much as an inability to function differently, a deep, genuine, bone-level incapacity to lie, to scheme, to play the game by the rules the game actually uses. Is that honor, or is it a limitation that was always going to kill him? The show allows both answers. Daenerys is, by every external measure of the first 6 seasons, a hero. She breaks chains. She frees slaves. She refuses to use her power to enrich herself and her small circle at the expense of everyone else. She builds coalitions and fights for people who cannot fight for themselves. And then she loses everyone who kept her connected to herself. Jorah, Missandei, 2 of her 3 children, and the certainty that had always powered her goodness has nothing left to moderate it, and she burns a city. Both of these Daenerys are the same person. The show does not let you pretend otherwise. The characters in Game of Thrones are not allegories exactly. They are not symbols standing in for clear moral positions. But they are each exploring a different answer to the same fundamental question. What do you do when the world does not reward the things it claims to value? Ned Stark says, "You hold to your honor anyway, because some things are worth more than survival." And he is right, and he dies for it. And the show does not pretend that he is wrong, exactly. But it does not pretend that being right is always enough. Cersei says, "You accumulate power until power protects you, and you protect only the things that matter most to you, which is your children, and then yourself, and then your family name, and that's the whole list." And she achieves an enormous amount by those terms, and loses everything by the terms she refused to consider. Daenerys says, "You break the wheel, you dismantle the old systems, you refuse to play by the old rules." And the tragedy of Daenerys is not that she was wrong about the wheel needing to be broken, but that she brought to the breaking of it a certainty about her own rightness that turned liberation into something else. She was the fire. She just never asked who else might be standing near it. Jon Snow says, "You do the thing that needs to be done, and you try to have as little blood on your hands as possible, and you accept the exile that comes when you've done something that cannot be undone. He is neither fully a Stark nor fully a Targaryen, neither fully the man of the South nor fully the man of the North, and his final home is in the in-between, beyond the wall, among people who have no kings and do not want them. And Sansa Stark says, "You survive, you learn. You take every terrible thing that has been done to you, and you understand it so completely that it can never be used against you again. And you build something. You build a North that is independent, a kingdom run not by conquest and fire, but by the particular cold wisdom of people who have been through enough to know what really matters." Sansa Stark began this story as a girl dreaming of princes and courtly love, of knights and honor, and the beautiful machinery of the world, as the songs described it. She was given the opposite of every dream she carried into King's Landing. She was given a front-row seat to cruelty and manipulation and political violence and the systematic dismantling of everything she believed in. And she took all of it, every lesson, however horrible, and she used it. She became a queen by the fullest measure of the word, not because she was born to it or because she seized it, but because she earned it in the hardest possible school. It is one of the most satisfying character arcs in the entire series, and it is worth sitting with, in the quiet after the story ends. Arya Stark says, "There is something west of the maps, and I am going there, and I will tell you what I find." This is the most explicitly hopeful note the show strikes in its final moments, and it deserves to sit with you the way it was clearly meant to. Not everything needs to end in a throne room. Some things end at the edge of a map, looking out at open water. Bran Stark says, "I am the memory." He sits in the great seat of Westeros, and he sees everything that has happened, and everything that is happening. And whether you find this satisfying or strange or both, there is something true in the choice. What prevents power from corrupting is memory. The memory of what power does when it is not checked. The memory of the people it costs. Bran Stark, the three-eyed raven, the repository of all history, is the only ruler in Westeros' long and bloody history who cannot forget. The final scene of Game of Thrones does not belong to the throne room or the battlefield. It cuts between its characters in a sequence that feels like breathing out. Sansa is crowned in Winterfell, surrounded by the people who followed her and fought for her and believed in her. Jon is walking north in the cold morning light, the trees opening up around him, the air clean and still, Ghost running beside him. Arya stands at the bow of a ship, the wind in her face, the horizon ahead of her completely unknown. The music is quiet, the light is gray and soft. The world has been burned and broken and rebuilt in forms its previous inhabitants would barely recognize, and the people moving through it are changed in ways that are permanent, carrying their scars and their losses and their particular hard-won forms of wisdom. They are not the same people who started this journey, none of them are, but they are still here. It is a strange, imperfect, genuine ending to a strange, imperfect, genuine story. There is nothing left to do now but sleep. You have traveled from Winterfell to the Wall, from King's Landing to Braavos, from the grasslands of Essos to the ruins of a city built on a throne nobody should have wanted so badly. You have sat with dragons and direwolves and characters who were simple, and characters who were impossible. You have watched a story that believed in complexity, the way most stories believe in simplicity, that preferred to ask hard questions rather than offer easy answers, that said the world does not sort neatly into heroes and villains, and that the distance between a liberator and a tyrant can sometimes be crossed in a single day, depending on what you have lost and how much you believe you are right. Think about the Stark children for a moment, in the quiet before sleep. 5 of them at the start, all of them about to be scattered across the world by forces larger than any of them could have anticipated. Robb, who became a king and was good at war and died at a dinner table. Sansa, who learned every hard lesson the world had to offer and used each one. Arya, who crossed the sea and crossed the continent and crossed the boundary between who she was born as and who she chose to become, and who ended up at the prow of a ship headed somewhere no map reaches. Bran, who fell from a high window and never walked again and saw everything, past and present and perhaps future, and who ended up with the weight of all history sitting inside him as gently as water in a still vessel. And Rickon, who was too young for any of it and died because of that youth, in a field running toward his brother. 5 Stark children. The story of the Starks is the story of survival and transformation, of a family dismantled and rebuilt in new shapes, of what remains of people after the worst things have happened to them. What remains is the name. What remains is the cold and the gray stone and the old words. Winter is coming, not as a threat eventually, as a fact, as something that has been prepared for. These characters have been in your mind for all this time, and they will be there quietly when you close your eyes. Ned Stark's dignity, unchanged even in death. Catelyn's love, fierce and mortal and real. Robb, who chose love over politics and paid for it. Tyrion, who spent an entire series being smarter than everyone in the room and still getting most of it wrong, which is perhaps the most human thing in the story. Jaime, who tried to rebuild himself from the pieces of who he had been and almost got there. Jon, who just wanted to be decent in a world that made decency enormously expensive. Arya, sailing toward the edge of everything with a sword at her hip and nothing but open water ahead. Let the images settle now, the snow falling on the courtyard at Winterfell, the fire in the hearth of the Great Hall, the gray light coming in through old stone windows, the sound of winter outside, far away. You don't have to hold on to any of it. Just let it be there, soft and still, like a story you heard once from someone who knew it well. It doesn't have to mean anything right now. It just has to exist. Close your eyes if you haven't already. The story is done. Winter was coming for a very long time, but winter passes. It always has. And after the longest, coldest night in the memory of the world, the light came back. And the people who were still there, changed, scarred, carrying what they carried, looked at each other and began the work of whatever came next. Sleep well.